Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Hocus Focus. I'm Thomas Sheridan.
And I'm Sara Mondaini.
And here we are. We've made our first 5-pointed star in terms of the show. And that's very exciting. Always a big moment. And we hope we have a good show for you tonight. We've got a lot of interesting topics and ones that don't really get covered much by other people. And you'll get our unique take on it. So how are you doing, Sara?
I'm not so bad. Yeah, I've had a good week of researching the topics and putting something together to talk about. And it's been great. Yeah, I've had a good week. Have you?
Yeah, I've been doing the same. And it definitely gets more interesting and more exciting the more you get into this stuff, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
And also a happy Imbolg to yourself, Shona Imbolg, Sara, and all the viewers at home. It feels like spring and it has a nice energy about it. Are you finding that?
Yes, it does. It feels milder energetically. It does. And the snowdrops are up and the daffodils are starting to show. So may Bridget's blessings of earth be upon your place.
And important in terms of a magical working, the frog spawn is starting to be reported in the south of England and in the south of Ireland. So get your apples and your incantate spells ready and get out there and get those apples into the water.
Yeah.
Now, the first subject this week is one that's always fascinated me. I've written a book called Walpurgis Night about the occult and the Third Reich, and I never got to write a second volume. And one of the things I was going to cover in the second volume is tonight's topic, which I will let Sara introduce and lead with.
Okay. So when it comes to folklore surrounding a specific time, I think World War II could well be the darkest point in history. And the Nazis frequently studied and dabbled in the occult, and they seemed to be obsessed with scientific supernaturalism. And this sort of thing included research into super weapons such as death rays and anti-gravity machines and super rockets and even flying saucers. And, as I found out, resuscitation of the dead. Now, one of the many mysteries surrounding the Nazis is the Nazi bell, or Die Glocke. And the bell kind of encapsulates their obsession with this scientific supernaturalism. Now, according to leaked government military documents, this contraption was said to be decisive for the outcome of the war and had the power to change civilization. Now, this bell is a hard, heavy metal contraption that's 9 feet wide in diameter and said to be around 12 to 15 foot tall. And it has 2 cylinders that rotated anti-clockwise, and they were filled with this strange violet-coloured liquid known as serum 525. And this machine operated with millions and millions of volts, and it had the electric cables from a local power station plugged into it. And it was so strong, it had to be chained to a huge underground structure that was said to look like Stonehenge. And when it was switched on, it emitted this strong radiation. And many of the scientists who were working on it died as a result of that. And they had to work on it, in a room full of ceramic bricks that separated them and the machine. And if that wasn't bad enough, if the radiation didn't get you, then you still weren't safe, because at the end of the war, the 62 scientists that were working on this thing were shot dead by the SS and put into a shallow grave so that they couldn't tell the secrets of whatever this thing was to the outside world. And there are lots of theories into what this top secret project was. Was it a particle accelerator? Was it an anti-gravity machine, a time machine? And we're going to go through the possibilities and probably more besides. But I just want to bring into the discussion a strange incident that was reported in 1965, which purports to the object possibly being a time machine. So I've got a report here from the 9th of December, 1965, and it states a large fireball seen in 6 US states as well as Ontario, Canada, was spotted. There was hot metal debris also over Michigan. And grass fires and sonic booms in the Pittsburgh area were also attributed to this fireball. In Kecksburg, people say they saw wisps of blue smoke and vibrations, and that something from the sky had crashed into the woods. The locals went to look in the woods, but when they got there, they were met with state troopers, US Air Force personnel, and classified government personnel, telling the town people that there was nothing in this area of Pennsylvania and to go home. The local people said a bell-shaped object had been seen in the woods along with the other debris. Now, the strange part of this story is when the bell was said to be evacuated from the mine in Germany, SS Lieutenant Hans Kommler, who was in charge of it, either gave the bell up to the US government for his freedom, or they say he used the bell to project forward in time 20 years to escape death and ended up in the woods in Pennsylvania. So
I never heard about the Pennsylvania aspects of it. There's just one little correction there. The mines were in Bohemia, in Czechoslovakia.
they were, yes,
Wenceslas,
yeah.
Germany, yeah, Wenceslas. Now, I'm going to break from my usual ad-libbing on this and read. When you mentioned this, that we should cover the topic the other day, I went back into my files for Walpurgis Night 2 that I never wrote, and amazingly, I found a section, an outline, a working outline for a possible chapter on the bell, the Glocke. And I'd like to read that. Perhaps we might even produce a series of books for this channel, something like the Hocus Focus case books or Hocus Focus files or something like that down the road. And we can include these essays in it and stuff like that myself and Sarah will write. But I would like to read this. It was funny finding this today, but I would like to read it because this was written about 6 or 7 years ago. And this is my interpretation of the Glocke at the time. And I'll read that out for the audience. Die Glocke, the Third Reich's ultimate wonder weapon. There is no doubt that the National Socialists of Germany viewed developments in technology with a very different conceptual eye than was considered the norm in most Western nations in the years between 1933 and 1945. Everything from medications to aircraft design and every other form of technology in between was reimagined as something of a blank slate upon which new and often strange developments were allowed to take place. The pseudo-religiosity of the Nazi subculture considered such technological developments as acts of divine or racial will, as if some unseen supernatural force, the most well-known of these being the concept of vril, being something of a mystical guiding force in terms of developing such novel and unique technological inventions and processes. Practically in the wake of the death of Adolf Hitler on Walpurgis Night, April 30th, 1945, the world began something of a fascination with the occultic and supernatural elements of the Third Reich, especially following the US Army's capturing of the magical and supernatural regalia of the SS within a secret vault in Nuremberg, close to the end of the war. This coupled with the phenomenon of the Foo Fighters, the strange, seemingly intelligently guided lights reported by Allied airmen during the final days of the war, only added to the idea of Nazi occultism and their technological achievements being fused together in the minds of many. This idea was even fueled by Adolf Hitler himself, who promised German people that he would unleash a wonder weapon, a Wunderwaffen, in their hour of greatest need. No sooner had the war ended when special detachments of US, British, Soviet, and French military personnel and scientific specialists were being sent to all corners of the former and remaining territories of the Third Reich in order to discover and procure any high-tech engineering and weaponry which the Germans had been developing in secret or had managed to place into operational service. While some of these developments, such as rocket programs and atomic heavy water technology, are well known, Allied investigators were told to leave no stone unturned in their quest to find Hitler's possible Wunderwaffen. The Americans in particular were completely astounded by the level of technological proficiency which the German military had successfully developed and which were still the things of science fiction and movies and Saturday afternoon matinees in the USA. In post-war Europe, and especially in France, this fascination with the fantastical Nazi occult technology became something of a popular topic of speculation and research, a topic of research which to this day remains more popular than ever. One of these lines of research went into the former German-occupied Czechoslovakia, and according to Polish investigative journalist Igor Witkowski, in his book Prawad o Wunderwaffen, The Truth About the Wonder Weapon, published in the year 2000, Witkowski's describes a strange machine called the Bell, die Glocke in German, which was allegedly to be a type of aircraft and which levitated by means of an anti-gravitational technology. The engineering behind the Bell, named this due to its bell-like design, not only caused the device to glow and rotate in midair, but also produced the effects of a time machine. The knowledge of the Bell having been known from the interrogation of German prisoners of war after the war itself. The Bell itself was about the size of a delivery truck or van, and when stood on its end, the working part of the Bell was by means of two high-speed counter-rotating cylinders made of ceramic material. The cylinders themselves being filled with a purple-colored liquid, radioactive and metal, similar to red mercury. Apparently, the Bell was extremely dangerous and unstable, and this led to the deaths of several scientists and military personnel who had worked on the project. The Bell was in development between 1943 and 45, and when the project ended, according to some researchers, the SS then moved the device to a secret location where it would eventually be offered to the US military in exchange for amnesty for the SS officers involved in the project. How much truth there is to the story of the Bell depends on one's attitude towards it. While skeptics in the bunkers claim the entire story is a hoax with little paper trail evidence to suggest its existence, it would still be foolish to make this assumption, considering that the V1 and V2 rockets, both guided by robots, themselves came into successful fruition, having been successfully developed by Wernher von Braun and his team, who had also developed the rocket, which achieved escape velocity and even took a photo of the Earth's curvature from space. All this at a time when the Allied powers were still experimenting with biplanes and gas-filled dirigible airships. While it isn't true that Nazi scientists and officials carefully documented all their projects in some detail, to suggest that the lack of paperwork being enough evidence to condemn the Bell to fiction is also something of a stretch, considering the files may have been destroyed in anything from Allied bombing raids to the individuals involved destroying or hiding the research documents themselves. There is also the possibility that the US military and intelligence services considered the Bell to be too classified to release details to the general public, if indeed they had obtained this technology following the war. The Third Reich's research programs were decades, if not a century ahead of other powerful developed nations at the time, and to assume that the story of the Bell or even rumors of Nazi flying saucers would be naive in the extreme, considering that the USA implemented Operation Paperclip so as to get the top Third Reich scientists over to their side, which they mostly did, and the results bore fruit, especially so within NASA and the eventual Apollo space program. The Saturn V rocket motors used in 1969 to send astronauts to the moon were initially developed by von Braun back in 1944. NASA merely provided the former Nazi scientists with the resources and infrastructure to make the rocket motor larger and more powerful. That if these German scientists were successful in the creation of the Bell, then under no circumstances could the general public know of its existence and purpose, due to the sheer magnitude of the potential propaganda elements which this presented. Knowing such a device as the Bell had been successfully developed and was still in the hands of escaped Nazis would unleash all kinds of paranoid speculation. These would range from fears of the Nazis who had escaped to South America continuing developing the Bell there, as they had done with the high-tech aircraft technology in Argentina. Worse still, even such possibilities that perhaps Hitler had even used the Bell or some other wonder weapon so as to escape at the end of the war, and that perhaps rather being the case of the wonder weapon being used to save Germany in its hour of need, the device was actually used to save Adolf Hitler himself, eluding capture and vanishing into space and time and out of the hands of the Allies pursuing him. And even seems comical today, yet the Third Reich had managed to get a rocket into space at a time when the Allies were experimenting with little more than glorified fireworks. It is also worth pointing out that the primary individual mentioned as being the overseer of the Bell project, Dr. Hans Kammler, had been given the task by Albert Speer, the Third Reich's armaments minister, the charge of special construction projects, making Kammler one of the most influential and powerful individuals within the Third Reich as the war progressed. this including overseeing the development of the highly advanced and successful V1 and V2 rocket programs. Therefore, if the story of the bell were in fact to be true, then Dr. Hans Kammler would have been deep inside the development of this alleged anti-gravitational time machine, as much as he had been deep inside the rocketry program. Interestingly enough, Dr. Hans Kammler completely vanished in late April, early May in 1945 and was never seen again, as if he had vanished off the face of the earth. His last movements were recorded as being in German-occupied Czechoslovakia at war ends. While mainstream historians go to extreme lengths to play down the Nazi occultism as being merely a fringe phenomena, with little evidence to support anything beyond a few SS-eccentric rituals, when in fact there is a vast amount of evidence for the Third Reich being an occult empire. Regardless of how these skeptics play the element down, the evidence is overwhelming that this occultic science and technology mentality extended deep into the philosophical and day-to-day world of the Third Reich. The evidence for the depth and obsession of Nazi leadership into the world of the occult has only grown with the ongoing discoveries of documents and libraries once belonging to the Third Reich. The most commonly cited location of the laboratories used in the development of the bell was allegedly not far from the colossal Skoda works in Plzeň, in the Bohemian region of what was Czechoslovakia, today the Czech Republic. This location would have made sense as a site for such a project. The Third Reich made the capture of the Skoda works a major priority with their annex of the country in 1938, turning the location into a major place of military machine construction. As the plant provided enormous industrial and material resources, as well as skills which the Nazi SS employed scientists required in order to develop such a project such as the bell, the rumors of the project being located in the German border regions of Czechoslovakia only takes on a greater veracity. The regions within this part of Bohemia also contain numerous mines and underground tunnels, which, similar to the V-Weapons program, would have provided ideal locations for such a highly secretive project to have been developed. While the paper trail for the existence of the bell is non-existent, the circumstantial evidence for its design and operation, along with the individuals and resources to have made it happen, are found in abundance. The search for the Glocke continues. Now, that was what I wrote about 6 years ago about it. And I actually feel stronger now, Sarah, about it than I did back then. And I really do. There's something that tells me, especially as the way it's ridiculed, and especially as you really understand how far ahead Nazi technology was, that they would have done this because they were doing things like using human beings as lab rats and stuff. They would have not cared at all about the ethical or any other implications. So it's a fascinating story, as is everything to do with the Nazi occultism and secret technology.
It's interesting, just going back to Igor Witowski. He said that he's still in contact. He's actually in contact with people today who are in control of the bell to this day, but they're not connected to the Nazi agenda in any way, but they're more for the great good of mankind. And they said that something connected to this bell is going to be revealed very soon.
You don't know
that's
that.
As much as I could find on it.
Yeah, you don't know about that, but it's also interesting. There's two independent sources for it. People say there's only one source. There's actually two independent sources. There's him, who claims that it was an interrogation of a Polish prisoner, or sorry, a German prisoner of war with Polish guards that admitted all this stuff, that came forth about it. And secondly, there was a book published in France in the 1950s when the French were obsessed with all this Nazi secret technology before anyone else, mainly because they were right beside it, and all the V-Weapons programs, a lot of that was done in France. And so that also mentioned it. So there's actually two sources for it. There's actually two sources that can be cited for the bell, not one. And although there's a lot of, stereotypical things like pictures of it with Nazi swastikas and everything on it, and it looks like the stuff of video games and everything, you have to remember, the Nazis really were involved in similar kinds of stuff. So it wasn't like, and it's also, there's something about the bell story that rings, no pun intended, that rings so true when I first heard it, because it's so strange. It's not a spacecraft. It's not an airplane. It's like something completely different,
Or even MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, have had something to say about it, and they say it's very possible the Germans may have reverse engineered some kind of tech from a UFO crash in the Black Forest back in 1936.
Yeah, but MUFON,
And
yeah, the thing is that MUFON, they're hiding the truth about UFOs by having us alien possessed and spaceman possessed. The reality is, like I'm going by Father Bailey's book has just come, currently reading the UFO deception. I'm more and more convinced that we're dealing with a spiritual phenomenon when we're dealing with UFOs, and of course we'll cover that in later shows here on Hocus Focus.
we've also got prisoners in the neighbouring concentration camps who say that they'd seen a pale blue glowing barrel object that was ascending and descending in the sky and then landing again from where this thing was.
There was also another report of a German officer who was driving through that part of Bohemia along with a convoy near the end of the war. And they said that all the cars' ignitions, electrical systems all stopped for about a half an hour. And they couldn't start the cars up for until, after half an hour, things came back to normal. There was like an EMP force. And later on, he was talking to somebody, had mentioned that they were dealing with a secret technology in Bohemia that was based on the stone circles you get in Britain and Ireland that had a special energy that they discovered before the war. And ironically, one of the sites of the bell is a concrete tower, which looks like a water tower foundation. No, it might not be. And it's actually nicknamed Stonehenge.
Yeah, that's what it was attached to underground, just because it was so powerful and so strong. Yeah. Before it went, it's been in about 4 different places, hasn't it? Which set my mind thinking, how did they transport it? Did they use these deep underground military bases to move it around?
Well, we know that the Nazis went underground during the end of the war. I mean, the whole V weapons project was done underground inside mountains, and just to keep it safe from Allied bombings. But it wasn't that huge. It could have been transported by a train because it was the size of a van. It wasn't massive. It was the size of a delivery truck, so it could have fit easily on it like a flatbed railway carriage car and moved around that way. In fact, look, the Germans are moving those massive guns like the Leopold, these like gigantic artillery guns. These things, were enormous, and they were having no problem moving them by rail. So it would have been no problem moving the bell by rail if they had to. Just
right. Well, I read about the Nazis studying necromancy, and the way that ties into this is they were said to be doing dead things to wounded soldiers, experiments to see how long they could last with and without water, and trying to create some kind of super soldier that wouldn't die. And the bell was said to have been housed beneath a hospital in Berlin at one point. And I tie that in with the necromancy. Why was it buried under a hospital? Is it because they had access to dead bodies for these experiments? Because morgues are usually in the basement of hospitals, so they'd have a constant supply under there to experiment with this thing.
A lot of those pharmacological stuff that the SS used was actually developed by the DuPont company in America in the 1930s. The DuPont family were nut jobs. And they believed that they could turn human beings into eugenesis, of course. And they believed they could turn human beings into super beings with vaccines that they could be injected with that would turn them into, immortal and highly intelligent. I mean, just complete nutcases, but all that stuff ended up in the hand of the SS.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's also a movie, I don't know what year it was, called Overlord. And that was it was a Nazi zombie movie about the Nazis experimenting on dead soldiers, and it ended up going wrong, and they created a zombie invasion.
But you still see in mainstream historical sources, the Nazis weren't really into the occult, just Himmler and a few little a few other handful of them. Well, I've been to Wilhelmsburg Castle in Germany near Hanover, or near not Hanover. It's in that northern part of Germany, Paderborn, and it is full of stuff. It's enormous. It's a massive library in the basement of all the occult stuff of the Third Reich, and that's only a bit of it they show to the public because there's so much in storage. So and then they found Himmler's second personal library on the cults in I think it was in Prague not too long ago or somewhere like that. These guys were massive into it, and the shitloads of evidence they were, and this nonsense that it was only a little thing they dabbled in. It's such bullshit.
Well, Himmler relied on astrology that much. They had their own personal astrologers, and they actually used astrological propaganda to try and fool the Allies. And the British intelligence knew that they were so obsessed and so reliant on these astrologers that they too would get, they would have spies go in there to get to these astrologers and to tell them to tell the SS soldiers fake forecasts, fake astrological horoscopes and whatnot. So yeah, they apparently Hitler and Himmler wouldn't make many major decisions without consulting a horoscope or some kind of divination. And I'm sure we're not talking Mystic Meg sort of stuff here. I'm sure we're talking about proper people who knew what they were doing.
Well, the whole thing started in the Intercontinental Hotel in Munich in 1919, where the Thule societies was having seances, and in one day walks Adolf Hitler, and they were just instantaneously, as soon as Rudolf Hess seen him, they knew they'd found their man. And at the same time, it was around the same time he'd gone to visit the publishers of Ostara magazine and Guido, the esoteric magazine Ostara, and Hitler was an avid collector of them. And it happened at the same time Guido von List hoisted the swastika, the hammer of the sigil of Thor, funny enough, in motion above the castle on the Danube. So, I mean, the whole thing from start to end, even the way that Hitler vanished on Walpurgis night, the witches' Sabbath, it's just every inch of it is full of that stuff. And then her historians saying, it's just a little bit of an eccentric little thing they dabbled in at one time. It's not true at all.
Well, for a little bit of eccentric stuff, Dennis Wheatley got a whole load of books about it, because I'd just finished reading Strange Conflict, and that was totally if you believe that book, which I do tend to believe there's a lot of truth in it, then the war was fought using occult tactics and astral traveling, and that's what they used to spy on remote viewing.
Well, Wheatley was involved in the London Working Group along with Ian Fleming, and their job was to create propaganda that would spellbound the people of England to make them believe they were winning the war even when they were losing. And they met in an office with a statue of a satyr on the desk, and he had to publish that, and that was published in the war. That book, that was what's amazing about it. That was published during the war. So here he's talking about people being killed in bombings and their astral bodies as leaving buildings around London. At the time, it was actually happening in real life. At the same time, Austin Osman Spare was being bombed. At the same time, Alistair Crowley and Lady Farida Harris were making the top deck. At the same time, Dion Fortune and Gerald Gardner were involved in a magical battle of Great Britain on the cliffs of Dover. I mean, we have, you said at the beginning of the thing that it was the most spiritually dark warfare of the world had known. It was until right now. I think we're back in an even worse thing now. But yeah, I mean, the history, we have to stop thinking of these things in terms of political and events and start thinking them in terms of spiritual events. And then things like the bell take on a new thing, because they almost become like a kind of a tabernacle, for the survival of the real power, energy, force, and whatever. The stuff never ends. I mean, we could probably do 20 programs on that's the occult and never run out of material, which we won't, but we will cover it now and again over the years to come. But yeah, amazing stuff. So thanks very much for that, Sarah. And I hope I didn't bore people reading that out, but I thought it was pretty neat to do that.
No, it's a fascinating subject, and there's lots of angles to it and lots of theories. So yeah, like you say, could go on all night talking about it. I mean, I'm still reading about it now.
So that was The Bell by Glocke. In this week's Folk Horror Cinema, we review the movie called The Mist, based on the Stephen King novel by the same name and title. The film takes place in his fictional Castle Rock in the state of Maine in the USA, and involves the life of an artist who finds himself thrust into an unbelievable horror caused by a military experiment in a nearby base that goes wrong. Upon going into town with a neighbor whose car has been damaged in a storm, which affected the village they live in the night before, they find that the entire town is shrouded in a mist, and it seems to be affecting and killing people. And they all become locked into a supermarket, some believing it's a climatic error, some believing it's something else. And soon enough, it starts devouring people. The first one is a boy who works in the store who's eaten in a loading dock by this Lovecraftian type entity that seems to be present in the mist. This leads to a very interesting conflict between him, the main character in the story, and his neighbor, who refuses to believe, even when the evidence is overwhelming, including some others, that the actual mist is dangerous. And he believes it's a scientific rationalization. He gets very uppity and angry about it. He gets very condescending and makes really nasty accusations that people are trying to make a fool of him when they're trying to save his life. Another character that develops in the context of the story is a woman called Mrs. Carmody, who develops a religious Christian cult as things get progressively worse, especially as she, during one period where they're attacked by these large bugs inside the supermarket, one lands on her but doesn't kill her, believing that she's been chosen by God to lead the people in the supermarket to the promised land. And the actress that plays the part is fantastic. She becomes increasingly more fanatical as she gathers up her followers in the cult, and it becomes like a Jonestown type situation. And she becomes extremely dangerous. Eventually, they try to break into stores nearby to get medications to help someone who's been injured in the attack by the bugs. And it's all in vain because the person dies anyway. And they find out that these things are everywhere. Animals seem to be magnified. Bugs are gigantic, spiders are gigantic, everything is gigantic. Eventually, upon interrogating a young soldier that was at the base and lives in the town, he said there was rumors of them opening up portals and getting into other dimensions, and the dimensions somehow crossed over into this dimension, and the beings and creatures from that dimension were now in the town. Having no idea whether it just affected Castle Rock or the entire state of Maine or the entire world, a group of them decide to leave, and eventually some of them make it safely into a truck belonging to the artist who's the main hero in the story. And it ends with a tremendous scene where they encounter this gigantic Lovecraftian beast. And I won't give a spoiler alert for the end, but it's probably one of the most traumatic endings to a movie I've ever seen. Stephen King movies tend to be hit or miss when they're converted from his books to the films. The Mist is definitely a hit, and I highly recommend it for anyone interested in Lovecraftian horror, and also that kind of, if you like that kind of Nigel Neal, British Quatermass type storytelling and science fiction horror. It's kind of in that league, but told from an American viewpoint. So that was The Mist, an excellent movie. So what did you think of The Mist, Sarah?
Well, I thought the film was brilliant. It's full of Lovecraftian type monsters. It's full of suspense. It had me looking away in parts, covering my eyes, even holding my breath. And it does it all without being too gory. It's gory, but it's not too gory. It's just enough. And if you've got a fear of spiders, you might find yourself squirming around in your seat and brushing yourself down during the film and for a few hours afterwards as well, because there's quite a few bugs in there. But having said that, the movie covers a more psychological issue underneath the horrors of what's going on. And that's how humans behave differently when under intense fear. Now, for me, I don't believe people behave differently when they're faced with intense fear. I think they show their true selves. And that's what happened in this movie, and it didn't take long for it to start. And you eventually see a situation where you've got creatures outside and monsters inside. And if you watch the film prior to 2020, you'd probably think nothing of that, and you might even be forgiven for thinking, nah, people aren't really like that. But when you watch it now, you're going to find this film really triggering, and you'll recognize all sorts of behavior that we've come across recently. And I found myself getting angry at the characters and even swearing at the screen a number of times. It's very triggering. And Mrs. Carmody was the biggest monster of them all, and you soon get to see that the harmless, religious, eccentric lady who lived down the street and who everybody rolled their eyes at was anything but harmless, and that her virtuousness wasn't because she cared about you, but because she wanted a seat in heaven, and she was prepared to do anything to get it. So imagine being stranded inside a supermarket of all places with all your local normies and town characters. And some of the people in there wouldn't accept what was outside, even when they saw it for themselves. And others just assumed that out of the many, many explanations that it could possibly be, it had to be biblical, and they wouldn't entertain any other suggestion. So the film reiterated to me the importance of what you used to say in your videos about just waiting, just wait, because you do not know what is on the other side of a moment. So just hang on, because very often when you're in such intense situations, you find a light in the dawn, and there's always another way. And because of this, I found the ending very sad. And the character, who's also called Thomas, will have to live with the decision that he made forever. And he would probably end up going insane because of it. So the moral of this story is just wait and hold on to what you've got.
And the irony of the film was that the people who would just wait were not really profiled in it. They would have been the ones hanging back in the background who didn't join Carmody's cult or didn't follow the hero. You see, it kind of showed that, like, the white knight and the religious nut are the last two people you want around you in a situation like that. Your bravado and the Bible is the last thing you need. What you really need is just to wait and just hang out. And it was remarkable. I did not expect the film to end the way it did at the end, but especially as, like, I've heard people make the argument that Mrs. Carmody was right, but she wasn't. She was going to lead them to their doom. She wasn't going to stay in that supermarket. She was probably going to tell them at one point, we must now walk outside and meet our maker. And they would have all walked into their annihilation. And then there would have been the just wait types who would have just hung out in the background and said nothing. And that would have been me. I would have been down the back behind and they showed that in the film. There were little groups here and there around the supermarket who were not with Carmody and not with the heroic element. The ones who wanted to. Now, to say he was heroic, he also wanted to find out what happened to his wife. But they were not. That would have been me. That would have been me. No, I'm okay. I'll just stay here and do my own thing. It really was a movie that shows you that the individual and the individual thinker is the one who has the best chance of survival in such a situation. And if you saw the film before the recent years, the 2000 and 2023 years, I suggest you go back and watch it again. Because what was when that movie first came out, science fiction and so on, actually became a form of prophecy in terms of when you see it now and you say, oh my God, that supermarket is a microcosm of what we went through since April 2020. It really is, and all the characters in it. So I highly recommend The Mist, and it was also made into a TV series that wasn't bad, but it wasn't a patch on the movie. I haven't read the book. The movie is outstanding, and it's one of those movies. Every time you watch it, like that scene where they're in the truck and the Lovecraftian giant beastie is walking by, and their footsteps, they're being shaken by their footsteps after the petrol, the diesel in the truck is run out. it's almost like the gates of hell being opened. And they're still faced with the choice of what? Just wait. But no, that the gun becomes almost like a symbol of the needlecraft. Sorry, I hit the spoilers then, but hey, whatever. The film, you don't have to follow the story identically to know exactly what goes on, but it's all there. What we've experienced in the last 3 years is all over that movie.
Definitely go and watch it. Where can you find it? Is it on Amazon? Amazon Prime?
I bought the DVD when it came out. I liked it so much, so I don't know where people can see it. I'm sure it's all over the internet somewhere. You can find it if you look around. People will find it. But the DVDs, I picked it up in a discount store, like a charity shop for €1. So, I mean, it's an easy DVD to get.
Yeah.
So that was this week's Folk Horror Cinema. Our second story tonight is something you don't hear an awful lot about, and that is the Forteana supernaturalism of one of my favorite historical figures, Napoleon Bonaparte. I have a great interest in Napoleon. I think in many ways he was a fantastic leader who's been besmirched by history, basically because of propaganda. He wasn't a little short man. He was more or less the average size for his time. He was not this kind of buffoon that he's often portrayed, an arrogant buffoon played in films. He was actually quite a genius military leader, statesman, strategist, and he was actually trying to make Europe a much better, more peaceful place against the old aristocratic powers. But one thing that people don't know about Napoleon is that there is a mystical and supernatural side to him. When he was in Egypt during the Battle of the Pyramids, he went to visit the pyramids, and this man in a red cloak came out that was red and beckoned him in to go in. Napoleon went into the pyramids, and his officers and staff were extremely concerned after an hour when he didn't show up. Just as they were about to go in to look at the pyramid themselves to see if he'd been led into a trap and assassinated, he came out with a big smile on his face, and he had told them that everything was going to prepare for battle. We're going to win. This is after being weeks of being hesitant about going to battle. The battle was an enormous success for Napoleon, and safeguarded his reputation as a fantastic military leader. And even outside the pyramid, they said he was in a jovial state. He goaded two of his officers into two of his staff into having a race up to the top of the pyramid with a bottle of brandy to want to reach the top. And he was slagging them off and making fun of them halfway up, and said he was in a great jovial mood. Now, at the time he was in Egypt, he was inducted into a Freemasonic lodge called the Perfect Union, and he also joined the Masonic Lodge of Isis in Cairo. And this is not surprising, as he would have grown up as a Corsican peasant. He wasn't a peasant; he was a landowner. He wasn't an aristocrat. In fact, they made fun of him in the military because he didn't come from he was a Corsican country bumpkin to him. But he was of Italian heritage, but he would have grown up with the folk traditions and folklore of Corsica, and therefore he wouldn't have been adverse, even though he lived in atheistic France, post-revolutionary atheistic France, to such ideas. And this is why Freemasonry flourished in that era, and he was involved in it. But that's not true, by the way, that his soldiers shot the nose off the Sphinx. That's also propaganda. That's propaganda that was used against him. The man's the one character in history that's terrible propaganda used against him to really betray him in a very bad way. Anyway, there was a figure in French folklore called the Little Red Man, or the Little Red Demon, and he first manifested to one Catherine de' Medici in the 1600s, and she ordered the massacre of about 3,000 Huguenot Protestants following it as a blood sacrifice to this entity. Now, this entity took an interest in Napoleon, and candidly, Napoleon spoke about him. This is probably the same entity that came out of the pyramids and spoke to him. And this little red man, who appears all through Parisian folklore, became the personal advisor of Napoleon Bonaparte and led him and advised him on all kinds of campaigns and battles, which he was very successful in. However, on the invasion of Russia, after Russia had broken a peace treaty, he tried to capture Moscow. And the little red man came into the camp one night, and this was observed by his staff. Now, because it's actually in the French military records that an entity came into the camp wanting to see Napoleon, and Napoleon met up with him, and he told Napoleon, "Do not get involved in Russia. Go back home. It'll be a disaster." And it was. It was a catastrophe in the beginning of the end in many ways. Even though he had not lost his supernatural powers in certain events in his life, like when he was about to be arrested by the French army, he told the old guard how much he loved them, and how much, which he did. He was one of these few people in history, leaders, that genuinely had a deep love and affection for his soldiers. That's why they fought with him at Waterloo to the very end, the old guard. And they absolutely adored him, and he shared those feelings with them too. And he had a charisma that was unbelievable. Napoleon had a charisma that was comparable to a magician on that level. It was almost like, in the English-speaking world, through propaganda following the Battle of Waterloo and his exile, we're kind of made to believe he was this kind of dopey character, this like little cartoon type character. But he really was an incredible man, and in totality, in every way. He was a Renaissance man. He was, at one time in Egypt, and this is true, he used to bring scientists, mathematicians, and other people with him, and archaeologists, when he was traveling. He wasn't just a mindless warmonger. He studied history and art and everything else. And while he was in Egypt during the Battle of the Pyramids, while those two guys were having the race up the side of the pyramids, and he was making fun of them, he counted or estimated the number of stones on one face of the pyramid, and then in his head calculated how many stones were in the pyramid altogether, the Great Pyramid, and then surmised that there was enough stones there to build a 3-foot high wall all the way around France. When the mathematician who won the race to the top of the pyramid came down, he went to his tent later on and worked it out and said Napoleon's calculations that he did in his mind were perfect. That's exactly what it would do, and how many stones were in it. And he had this little red man who was there. Now, this little red man was also seen by other French figures. Louis XIV saw him on the night before he was arrested inside his chamber in Versailles. And when Marie Antoinette was being carried up to the guillotine to be executed, her maids and servants said that they saw the little red man in the crowd, and so on. So although it's really, the story is about the supernaturalism of Napoleon, it's also about this character of la homme rouge, la homme petite rouge, or you'd say in French, and the effect on French power structures that the nation of France, having at its root of its power structures a red demon, I find fascinating. And the fact that Napoleon worked with him ostensibly makes Napoleon a demonologist. So did you ever hear about this, Sarah?
Never heard about the little red man of destiny before. No, I haven't, and it is very interesting. And I'm wondering, did he conjure that up inside the pyramid, or was that thing already in the pyramid and just decided that he'd latch onto him and help him out as an advisor?
Or was his fellow troops that were with him under the pyramid, who were all Freemasons in the perfect union, were they involved in it? That they couldn't bring this thing out? Did they bring this thing out to actually meet him, and to fill him full of this like enthusiasm and this kind of thing? Were they actually more powerful than him in some ways? By actually bringing this thing forward. But
this thing never harmed him. It never did him any harm. It always told him which way to go and what to do. And the one time he didn't listen, I think, was when it told him not to attack Russia,
Yeah,
to
the
leave
Battle of
Russia
Moscow.
alone.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he didn't. He did it, and it failed.
it failed. So
So
he told him the truth, which is one of the kind of paradoxes of demonology. If you look at like the demonology of sort of cunning folk of England and the summering of Oberon, the king of the fairies, it's a demon in the traditional sort of Christian sense. All demons are evil, okay, but in other cultures they're not. Like for instance, in some of them they're actually pagan gods that have survived, and a classic one would be Paimon. Paimon is basically a Semitic desert god who protects camel caravans through the desert. And he was reimagined as a demon, this kind of thing. There's lots of those kinds of things, like Baal and Baal, these other things. And so just because something's a demon doesn't necessarily mean it has malicious intent. There seems to be a kind of an autistic honesty within these demons that if you have them and you get one of the truth off them, you actually will get it in some cases, including the bad news too. It's not that they're trying to help you. Because the little red man and entities like him are not trapped within the space-time. They can travel forward in the future and back. And so he went to the future and said, Napoleon, if you go attack Russia, you'll be finished as a great leader. And he did. And, although he had tremendous victories after that, or tremendous campaigns after that, but also victories as well, Waterloo stands out as a defeat. Another thing, there's a gigantic pyramid on that site where the Battle of Waterloo took place nearby. And there's all kinds of other weird esoteric things with that as well. But I haven't been to his tomb in Paris, but people tell me if you go there, the energy is astounding coming off it. It's like an astounding, you can feel his presence in this tomb. But yeah, he was a remarkable man, and we don't have leaders like that anymore. I think that's one of the reasons I'm appealing to him. He put himself on the battlefield with his men. He didn't send his men in to be sacrificed for his own glory. He actually cared about them. And he mostly was fighting against kings and queens and princes and dukes. He was basically, and he didn't like aristocrats and anything like that. He basically cared about the ordinary person and wanted to make their lives better. And the way he saw that could be done would be destruction of royalty. And in the end, sadly, they won. And this is why the old guard chose death at Waterloo than to actually live in a world without Napoleon, because they knew that it would just be the same old shit that we have with us to this day.
I read some legends about him being so loyal to his soldiers that if he said the word Bonaparte, it would conjure up all the soldiers that ever served under him that had died, and they come with him on the battlefield from beyond the grave, and they'd go with him and help this ghostly army to go and fight the enemy, and they'd be standing behind him like some kind of supernatural army.
Like I never heard that one, like in the Lord of the Rings, but yeah, you had that effect on them.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a commander whose troops had that much of the affection for him, that he was like their father.
Yeah.
Even the old guys and men had been on campaigns with him for 20 years and stuff like that. And it was just the charisma to have actually stopped the French. And when the Bourbons got into power and royalty had retaken over France, he had escaped and had made his way back to France. And as soon as he got into France, the Bourbon kings told them to go and arrest Napoleon. And the French army went down there to arrest him. And as soon as they laid eyes upon him, they swore allegiance to him. I mean, that's a level of charisma that's supernatural in on itself.
He came from a very superstitious family as well. He was a very superstitious man, and his family was very superstitious. And his nurse, Ilaria, I think she was called, Hilary, she used to chant incantations over him to protect him from demons. And he believed in omens and auguries and good luck charms. And he wore a little black satin heart between his waistcoat. and his shirts, and he said that he carried a scarab brooch that he found in the pharaoh's tomb in Egypt, and he used to have that in his waistcoat pocket as a good luck charm.
I was in his bedroom once in this place called Isabella. It's an island and I went to visit him, and I went into his bedroom that he stayed there, and you could and it was all covered in seashells. The whole bedroom was decorated in seashells, but you could feel his energy, even in a room that he'd only spent a few months in. You know, like there was something unbelievably supernatural about him. And, you know, he was an Italian, although Corsica is part of France, but ethnically he was an Italian. So he was raised in that kind of Italian folk magic world. And he maybe understood his soldiers being, you know, mostly working men and rural men in a way the aristocrats never will. He was sort of like the leader who wasn't from the upper classes, really. He was from a well-off family, but they were considered lowlives by the French aristocrats. They used to make fun of them and everything. But that little red man thing, I'd like to know more about any recent appearances and stuff like that in France, especially on the topic of on the previous topic, when the German occupation of Paris happened. Did the little red man show up?
I did read that when Napoleon went into exile, the little red man was supposed to have gone with him, and he's never been seen anywhere since.
Yeah. So
it would be interesting to see. There's been other sightings.
Well, that shows you the charisma, doesn't it? Because it's one thing for your men to be completely devoted to you to the end, but for a non-human entity to be devoted to you till the end.
Just on an aside, going back to last week's episode, Napoleon disliked Fridays and the number 13. And you'd never begin a journey on a Friday or on any 13th day of the month. So he was very superstitious. And then the other side of that, he regarded other dates as particularly lucky. And after winning a battle, Austerlitz in 1805, yeah, he considered December the 2nd one of his luckiest dates. And it was lucky for him every year thereafter. And again, June the 14th on another victory day for the Battle of Marengo in 1800. Every battle victory date he considered was a lucky day, but he wouldn't make any decisions or go travelling anywhere on the 13th or on a Friday.
Napoleon. And again, these are subjects that are just tremendous and have other aspects to them too. So if you have any more things to add to this or add to other topics, leave it below. And now here comes Sara with a psychic hygiene.
Have you ever felt negative atmospheres in particular places? And does your office feel a bit heavy due to an argument or a disagreement because you've been around toxic people and brought some of that energy home with you? Well, if we don't clear it regularly, it can build up in layers over time and leave us feeling miserable and overwhelmed and exhausted, and often not understanding what the cause is, and we just put it down to being just one of those things. But it isn't just one of those things, and it can be cleared, and it should be cleared on a regular basis. And again, you don't need any fancy paraphernalia to do this. All you need is the earth we are standing on. She's a big ball of energy, and she's magnetic and has power that we can't even begin to get our heads around. She's got the power to manipulate tides, bring in the seasons, and anchor us to the ground. And the surface below our feet is full of magnetism and electricity. And this means she can absorb negative energy deep into her core and vibrate it until she transmutes it into something healthier, and then release it out again into the atmosphere. And it's basically healing at its most primal form. So in the place that you want to cleanse, imagine there's a spinning plug hole or a vortex, a bit like what happens when you pull the plug after you've had a bath. You can even imagine the gurgling sounds if it helps. But instead of water being pulled down the plug hole, see the negative energy being pulled down into it instead. and visualize or feel it being sucked out of your space and down that plug hole until you can sense or feel that it's all been cleared. It might take a few goes, depending on how deep the layers of negative energy go that you want to clear. And usually after doing this type of work, I like to thank the earth afterwards by giving something back, such as picking up a piece of litter or planting something in the garden. And I do that as a pagan because I believe it's important to always give something back. It's okay to say thank you, but it's actions that are more appreciated when you're doing this kind of work. And that's my psychic hygiene tip for this week.
And the final topic this week is that of the Banshee, or the Banshee, the woman fairy, or sometimes the white fairy of Irish folklore and mythology. Now, I have a personal thing in this, in that when I was growing up, my grandmother, Phoenix, on my mother's side, she came from literally the bogs in the Irish Midlands, in the middle of nowhere. And she terrorized my mother and all her siblings and me as a little boy with stories of the Banshee outside her window and the fairies. And she was a firm believer in the fairies, no doubt about it. She was an intelligent woman, and from a kind of a family that was not like, you know, a peasant family as such. And she was a firm believer in the fairies and a believer in the Banshee and all the other things associated with Irish folklore. Now, the Banshee, or the Banshee, is synonymous with a portent of death. She appears at the time or someone is about to die, wailing in the dead of night. And she's also observed as a woman with long white hair in a white gown, combing her hair. And if one lays eyes upon her, either you or someone you love is about to die. There is a thing that she's connected to certain families, among them the Kellys, and I believe the Murphys and maybe the Lynches. But I'm no longer believing that, because I think while she may be connected to certain families stronger than others, mainly because of a strong belief in the Banshee within those families, I know many families who are not of the list, so as to say, who have stories regarding the Banshee. The skeptics have said that the Banshee is probably foxes wailing, and I've heard foxes wailing at night. It's a very spooky sound, very spooky. But to suggest that people who live all their lives and spend all their time in the countryside don't know what a fox sounds like is a bit disingenuous and patronizing to people who do live amongst foxes and nature in the countryside all their lives and do know what natural sounds sound like. The story of the Banshee is a very frightening one for a child to hear, because it was told to me that this thing looked in the window of cottages, combing her hair and wailing. Now, that was an absolutely petrifying vision for me when I was a child. And the idea that this death fairy could be there wailing in the night, and so on. The thing is that while she's a portent of doom, you avoid it by not looking at her. So apparently the doom is somebody who's about to die in the neighborhood, but if you look upon her, you will die. Now, there was a high-profile murder that happened in Ireland about 20 years ago of a French TV producer down in Kerry, I think it was, at Cork, in a rural area named Sophie de Plantier. She was quite a well-known celebrity in France. And I recently watched a documentary about her, the case, and they've never solved the murder. But they mentioned that the night before she was found dead, she was in a state of panic. She claims to have seen and heard the Banshee in the ruins of an old castle near where she lived, which I found, I nearly fell off my seat when I heard this. And a lot of people the next day were talking about it in that way. Now, the Banshee generally seems to be a rural thing. I'm not aware of any stories of Banshee in urban Ireland appearing. There are other entities, but not the Banshee. But I believe this story. I believe my grandmother told me the fairies were real. I believed her. I mean, there was no reason not to. And these people lived in an Ireland before electricity, where there was no TV. The radio was something that was on a few hours a day because you had to save the batteries. And at night, when the lights went out, you were in total darkness with no electromagnetic pollution. So if there was a veil between the worlds, it was much more apparent before the creation of electricity and so on. So I'm a believer in the Banshee, and I often wonder if the white lady that often appears in English folklore as haunting houses and stuff like that, and country homes, if the white lady might be the English version of the Banshee, mistaken for a ghost. So that's the Banshee. That's what I know about it. That's my personal experience. I've never heard of my grandmother. My late grandmother did. And yeah, I believe there's something to it. Absolutely. It's too deeply embedded for there not to be something to it. What do you think,
Well,
Sarah?
our family believes that we have a Banshee. And I'll just briefly tell you the story of what happened. Back in December 2003, I was woken up in the middle of the night by 3 very loud, slow knocks on the front door. And I lived alone then, and it was quite scary. And I went down to see from behind the curtain, and there was nobody there. Anyway, I went to work the following day. And later that morning, I got a phone call from my mum to tell me that my grandma had passed away and would I come home. So I went home to my parents' house, and my sister was there, and my mum and my dad. And we were all in the living room, just sat there in silence, and we were crying and drinking tea and just trying to come to terms with what had happened, when this almighty, shrieking, painful, cold wail came out of the kitchen, and it was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It went right through your bones, and it sounded so hurt and so sad. And all 4 of us heard it, and we all said, "What was that?" And anyway, my dad's family's Irish from Wexford, and he said it's the family Banshee. And that's when I told him about the 3 knocks that I got the night before. And he said they're known as the 3 death knocks, and it's the Banshee that delivers them before a death in the family. And to this day, my dad will not pick up a comb off the floor. He will not touch it if he sees it. He will not do it. And from that experience, I'd say that, yeah, Banshees are very real and not mythical creatures or legends.
Yeah, I was raised with that one too. If you're walking through the countryside and you see a comb at the side of a boreen or in a field or in a ditch or something, never ever pick it up because the Banshee had left it there and it's cursed. What is your father's family surname?
It's Bridges.
Bridget from Ireland. Bridges.
But yes, it's not one of the known names that they say are associated with them.
That's what I believe now. I think it may be because of the case that some families are more psychically attuned to these things in their bloodline. Like some families have, talents in them. I believe that some families have better psychic attenuation than other families, and it may not be that the families are cursed or followed by the Banshee, but they're more open to supernatural, especially what you're telling about the other things you've experienced in your life. They're more open to supernatural experiences, they're more easily attainable to them than it would be to other families, and that would explain that. The howl. What did it sound like again?
It was a wail. It's very wailing.
Was it female?
It was female. It was high pitched. It was cold, and it went right through the center of you, and it actually it upset you as well. Not least because you didn't know what it was. It was just the pitch of it just made you go like, "What was that? That's horrible."
Yeah,
it was.
Apparently, that when the Lusitania was torpedoed in World War I and went down off Old Kinsale Head in Cork, apparently Banshees were heard that night in the hills nearby, on the cliffs by the sea. So that's an interesting one as well. Like they were actually, but I've heard Banshee stories in England as well. So they're definitely not just an Irish thing. They seem to be in other countries as well, and so they probably just have their own names for them. you wonder, what do you think it is? Is it a fairy? Is it an ancestral spirit? Do you have any idea what you think it might be?
No, I think I would be inclined to say fairy, because you don't mess with the banshee. If it was some kind of ancestral spirit, then it wouldn't have the fear attached to it. It didn't sound nice. It sounded sad. It was blood curdling, the wail. I've never heard anything like it. I've never heard anything like it since.
Yeah, I don't think it's a nature spirit. I think it's exactly what it says on the tin. The white banshee, the old woman fairy, or the woman fairy, or the white fairy. Yeah, I definitely go along with that. And
coupled with the three knocks, the three knocks didn't sound earthly. They were like, it was on the front door. It was so loud. They were almost like three booms, knocking at the door. It was very odd.
Yeah. So if anybody has any banshee stories to add to this, leave them in the link below, because I'm sure many of you do, and some of you do, and any theories of what you think the banshee might be. And yeah, that's it. That's one. That's, there's not a lot of information about the banshee other than what we've just spoken about. And also it follows, again, it has an ethnic component, because it definitely follows people to other countries, because the pencil in West Virginia, and in fact in the land of Mothman, the banshee is supposed to be heard. People have brought it from Ulster with them. So, again, archetypes travel in tribes. They big time they do. So that's the banshee, and we'll keep on looking into these kind of archetypes as the show progresses. But anything you guys want to add to this, the comments are down below.
Okay, it's that time of the show now where we go over to our intrepid weather reporter, Thomas Sheridan, to see if we need our umbrellas and, more importantly, our Renfield raincoats or not.
This week's psychic weather is quite monumental. I don't think I've done a psychic weather before that spoke about the rising of an archetype, the releasing and the unleashing and the return of an ancient pagan god. And that's happening at the moment. The archetypal power force behind the god Thor is on the rise. Thor seems to be very powerful right now. Maybe as a result, in fact, it is as a result of the madness that has overtaken the world, our own version of the mist. And supernatural guidance has arrived in the form of the god of thunder, Dunner, or Thunner, as he's known to the Germanic tribes, and his other variations around the world, such as Indra in the Vedic and so on, or Vales in the Slavic pantheon. He represents the destruction of the present order, the smashing down of what was to bring in something new and better. That's why his sacrifice to the world serpent at the Battle of Ragnarok was not a useless sacrifice. He allowed the new world of the post-Aesir gods to actually come into manifestation. And if anybody needs Thor right now, it's Western society. What brings this also into focus is that right now, without getting too political, there's an enormous people movement happening on the north side of Dublin where I grew up, and these are the people of Thor. This was part of the old Viking world. The Irish name for people from the north side of Dublin was the Muntir Tomar, or the people of Thor. And Thor's Grove is located on that side of the city. And there's a power force rising to take on the globalists there. And I could feel it. But also around Europe, and other friends I have in other countries have suddenly started talking about Thor, his archetype rising. What does he represent? Well, he's the guardian of Midgard. He protects the family. Him and his wife Siv represent traditional virtues of men and women in strong traditional unions, the protection of traditional values, the smashing down of that which is false, or that which is corrupted by Loki. Loki is the lightning in the sky, and Thor chases him with his hammer. Loki has already happened and brought this horrific globalization across the earth, and now Thor with his hammer has arrived to smash it all down, so we can begin again with something more akin to what we used to have before the madness of the globalists took over. This is not a political psychic weather. This is a spiritual one. This is one I'm seeing everywhere. I'm seeing Christians talking about this is the time of revelation. I'm hearing other people talking about the Kali Yuga. I'm hearing other people talking about Ragnarok. Yes, it's them things. It's all the same thing. But the psychic weather this week is Thor has arrived. Hail Gunnar and rejoice. And that's me, Thomas Sheridan, with the psychic weather.
Thank you, Thomas, and welcome, Thor. We've been waiting a long time for some external strength to come in and just give us a pick-me-up and just help us along, because it's getting kind of difficult. Things are getting thrown on top of us, agenda after agenda and ideologies after ideologies, and it's getting harder and harder to be able to speak out and fight. So, yeah, I think we need Thor's intervention now.
Thor represents the destruction of evil and a return back to basics. He is willing to die himself in order to do this. And I'm seeing more and more people who are saying, I've had enough of this globalization madness with all the various orcs and Cenobites who are held up as role models in the world and being told they must have access to children and so on. Thor and Mjolnir have returned, and their world is over, and we begin again with a more traditional world. And, hail Thor and long live the old gods.
We just came back from holiday in Norway. At the beginning of the trip, I had this headline pop up on my phone from The Guardian: World's oldest runestone found in Norway, archaeologists say. With a nice synchronicity, the runestone was first going to be exhibited while we were in Oslo at the History Museum. This was only a very brief exhibition, so we're very lucky to see it. The stone was found in autumn 2021 during an archaeological dig in a grave field at Tyrifjorden in Ringerike. In one of the graves, they discovered a stone with several runic inscriptions. Burnt bones and charcoal from the grave reveal that the runes were inscribed between the years 1 or up to 250 AD. This makes it the earliest known rune stone. The rune is now named after the place of discovery, the Svingerud stone. Archaeologists aren't sure of the meaning of the main inscription of 8 runes, which translate into Latin letters as Idiberg. It could just be the name of the person buried there, for Idibera, or the intention to write the name Idibergu or the kin name Idiberung. There are other lines in a grid pattern, some zigzag figures and other markings. The museum speculates that someone could have been practicing learning how to carve runes. Archaeologists and scientists like the most prosaic explanation. I'd like to think that the ancient carvers were even trying to make a symbolic or artistic representation. I like that there's a mystery, a secret within the carvings which can never be completely known. The origins of the runic languages are still obscure, and even the etymology of the word rune. In Gothic and other Old English, Old Norse, Old High German, the word rune can mean whispered, secret, or private counsel, like the Greek mysterion, mystery, secret, and this has led to a belief many people have, and I would go along with, that there is something inherently magical or mystical within runes. But there's also just a more prosaic meaning for the word rune, that it can just mean dig, carve, scratch, as words for writing in other languages, such as the Greek word graphene, which means to paint. But to me, both are relevant, both those descriptions. It's a way of inscribing the material world to mark the human connection to the earth, like on this burial stone that was dug into the ground. But there's also a mystery within the code, something esoteric that can signify the spiritual or magical beyond and behind the material world. This is also borne out when we were at the museum by the other exhibits there about the legendary animals of Viking belief, and there was also on the Sami people and their shamanic beliefs in the north of Norway in the Arctic Circle. Animals were essential to the everyday lives of people, not only as food but as clothing, transport. Animals and humans lived together in a long house, and they were buried together during Viking times. Cremating animals was seen perhaps as a way of ensuring they rose again, like the bear Sirim in Valhalla, who was butchered every evening to feed Odin's warriors, only to rise again the next night. United by fire in death, animals were also believed to merge with humans to enable them to shapeshift. The infamous berserker warriors were channeling the energy of animals to become fearsome warriors. One interpretation of the etymology of berserker was the meaning that it meant bear shirt, and they may have worn bear skins to become one with the animal. In Viking art, there are many gripping beasts like this animal head posed from a burial, mythical creatures who turn and twist around themselves. The snake or serpent was found throughout Viking art, and it sheds its skin, so it's in a way a living shapeshifter. In Norse mythology, the snake has close ties to Odin, and Odin is a great shaman and shapeshifter who could become human or animal. The most famous serpent was the Midgard serpent, who encircled the earth and held it together by biting its tail. These elements all seem to bring together how the experiences we had in the south of Norway. We had begun our trip in the far top of the country in Skjøknes, near the Russian border, experiencing the beautiful dogs who carried us on sled beneath the night sky. We were then lucky enough to see a stunning aurora borealis, and as we watched the dancing lights in the sky, Liz said how our ancestors must have looked at those lights, and these originated the myths of the serpents and dragons that we know now.
And now we go to this week's book part of the show. I was going to say book review, but it's not really a review. It's really about books that have inspired us. And it's Sarah's turn to go this week with her choice.
Okay, so my book choice this week, I'll just hold it here, is Tending Brigid's Flame. You can see that there. And the book offers the history of Brigid the goddess and Brigid the saint. And it's full of ideas and things that you can do to connect to her and honour her, and to help make tending the home a more spiritual practice instead of looking at it as a chore. Now, I'm a homebody, and I just love being around the house. And one of the ways in which I love and honour my family is through tending my home and making it a pleasant place to live and a pleasant place to visit. And it starts at the front doors. And the book goes into detail about how the doors to your home are symbolic of the threshold between this world and the other world, between the seen and the unseen, and between what's inside and what's outside. So every time you pass over the threshold of a door, you're in that liminal space between where magic happens. And doors also protect, and they also separate, and they are in between what is in your home and what's outside of it, and they keep out what's harmful and keep in what's beneficial. So there's loads of ideas in this book for customs that you can adapt for making the entrances to your homes more sacred. And it covers bringing Brigid into all aspects of the homemaking archetype, from hospitality, the kitchen, the fridge, your living spaces, the garden, and it goes from the roof to the floor. and everything in between. And dotted throughout the book are examples and accounts of other people's experiences of Brigid. And they share their stories through anecdotes, and they share their practices and their inspirations. Now, what I like about this book is the devotions and the activities and the meditations. And it covers Brigid's many forms, and there's a lot of information in it. But there are also a few things that don't fit into my own practice. And the one fault I have with this book is that there was quite a bit of Wiccan perspective on Brigid. And I didn't particularly like that the author made the assumption that everyone reading this would be coming at it from that mindset. But if you take what you need and disregard the rest, then it is a great introduction into inviting Brigid into your life and your home. And I thoroughly recommend it. And I hope it brings as much warmth to your homes as it has to mine. And that's my book recommendation for this week.
You brought up a very good point there, Sarah, in regards to reading these kinds of books, is don't get into the baby and bathwater scenario. If the person writing it is coming from a specific angle that you don't necessarily, a philosophy that you don't agree with, don't say the whole thing is rubbish. I'm currently reading The UFO Discussion by Father Bailey, who's an Eastern Orthodox priest. I'm enjoying the book very much, but it comes to conclusions and aspects I agree with, but he comes to them from an Orthodox Christian viewpoint. This is not this still has not affected my enjoyment of the book and getting a lot out of it. I just say, well, that's his way, that's it, and I'm not going to enjoy or get a lot from the rest of the book. You'll always get someone's prejudice or viewpoints or feelings or philosophies or spiritual tradition in most books you read. It's very important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, okay, I don't agree with that, but the rest is interesting. So that's a very good point you made, Sarah, and thank you for that. My choice this week is The Night Battles by Carlo Ginzburg, Witchcraft and Agrarian Cults in the 16th and 17th Century. I bought this book when it came out back in the 90s in Hudson News in Pennsylvania Station in New York, and it has been a central part of my Fortean life ever since. Carlo Ginzburg was a professor at the University of Bologna in Italy, and he came across some documents by the Archbishop of Udine regarding the Inquisition interrogating Italian peasants in the north of Italy, around the area of Verona, who took part in shamanic practices, which they believed were perfectly compatible with their Christian beliefs. In fact, they were quite shocked when the inquisitors suggested that what they did was not Christian. These were the last known shamanic group in Western Europe. Now, there are shamanic groups in operation in Hungary among the Magyar pagans, but the last one in Western Europe is the Benedate, as they were called. Basically means the folk of good fare, of welcome, of kindness. It kind of means that the folk of the actual, good intention is basically what it means. These were people who lived in not only in that part of Italy, but also in parts of Slovenia and also into parts of France and maybe southern Switzerland, who practiced what they called night walking. What they would do was they would go arrange to meet in their dreams at night when they sleep in order to fight evil within their communities. And they did this in a shamanic state deliberately. These were what they called night battles. Now, most of this book is documentation by the actual Jesuit sources itself, and goes on about interrogations and stuff, which were not particularly brutal. The Benedate were not brutally treated. I think the Inquisition were more interested in what drove these people to do what they did, to more understand it and to persecute it as such. Now, the book has been such an influence to me, and it really has a lot to teach us in terms of what we had in Europe and what we lost. There is an abridged version, which don't get it. It's almost like, a student's Cliff Notes. get the full version, which is not even a big book. This one, Carlo Ginzburg, The Night Battles, Witchcraft and Agrarian Cults in 16th and 17th century Italy, Slovenia, and so on. And I absolutely adore this book and have since the day I bought it.
Thank you, Thomas. And where did you pick that up from?
In New York at Hudson News, which was a bookshop in Penn Station back in the 90s when it came out. And I bought it purely based on its cover art and the name of The Night Battles. So it just appealed to me, and I was glad I picked it up. It was always like one, those books that you see that grab you, like it took you rather than you took it. That's what The Night Battles was for me.
Right. Do you think some of those things in there are what Napoleon Bonaparte might have been aware of, with it being?
It's possible, but it also made me wonder something kind of outrageous. I was wondering if the people of these communities might have been descendants of the Cathars. You see, the Cathars weren't all exterminated. Some of them just became Catholics, and some of them just like moved to different areas. And a part of me wondered if there was some kind of link between the Benedate and the survival of the Cathars. It was about 300 years later, and these things don't come up out of nowhere. And it doesn't go too much into the concept of what was the history of the Benedate. Did they go back to very ancient pagan times? They seem to have been a fairly contemporary with the actual book that was written. So that was one of my theories, not a theory, but a line of speculation. Could they possibly been related to the Cathars, the ones that escaped and survived?
Thank you. That's another one to put on the list. I'm going to be reading forever at this rate.
and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Yeah, it is.
Okay, that concludes this week's Hocus Focus. I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you, Sarah. And I'll see you all next Sunday night. And we're in the middle of Imbolc, and we're in the St. Bridget's Day officially, I think, or the next day when this in Ireland, which is a national holiday, when this comes out appropriately. And I'll see you next time, Sarah.
Yeah, and I'm just going to finish off as always to say, please share the video far and wide so that we get noticed, because it is difficult on YouTube. It's a big place with lots and lots, millions of channels. So we're doing all right, but it's always good to get more exposure. So please keep sharing us. It's really appreciated. And we do enjoy reading all your comments as well. So thank you for your support.
Good night, Sarah, and good night, everybody.
Good night.